That's it. Back to you, Paolo.
Thank you. Yeah, so our talk today is on video games and ethics, which some of you may know. I've talked about a similar topics in the past. Usually, though, I was coming more from the perspective of education. So I have a master's degree from Teachers College in design and development of educational games, and then, so that's sort of where my interest area has been, is how do we teach ethics with games and things like that. But our speaker today is Vinny Caravella, and he's coming from a bit of a different perspective on this topic. So he has been covering the gaming industry for the last 15 years. He is currently the executive producer at Giant Bomb and hosts 2 weekly video game related podcasts. He is married to Society member Jessie Glass, and together they engage in the constant struggle to navigate the fast-paced world of digital entertainment for their 2 young children, Max and Roxy. Yeah, so he also has the perspective of actually being a parent, which I do not at this point. So when we were discussing how to really approach this topic, we kind of tossed around a few different ideas in terms of the topic of ethics, and so we were kind of focused a little bit in the beginning. I was focusing more on issues in the games industry. Right now the industry is struggling quite a bit with issues around, inclusion in terms of their hiring, and also in terms of representation in their games. For ethnic minorities and women and LGBTQ people. They've also been struggling quite a bit with labor relations issues and things like that. But what we kind of decided was that these are kind of problems that every industry is going through, and so a lot of the stuff that would be getting covered would be things that are already being talked about in other areas. And so we decided to focus a little bit more on games specifically, and what are the sort of areas where games are particularly challenged. And so Vinny, like, maybe talk a little bit about how you got into this industry, and then kind of talk a little bit about how you see games, um, the games industry and games journalism being distinct from other creative industries, and reporting on them.
Sure. Thanks, Paolo. Nice job, Rob. That was beautiful. Um, I was a video producer many years ago. Love playing games as a hobby. They say, don't, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. That's not true. We work very hard. But I shifted over from doing video production in New York. I went out to San Francisco, started working as a video producer at a company called GameSpot, which covers video games. Basically, people make games. GameSpot would review them, say, "Hey, is this worth your $60 to play this game?" This was about 2005, and just to put a pin in that is kind of around when YouTube and things like that started really taking off. If anyone remembers, a life without being able to just go on YouTube and spend an entire afternoon on there. Before live streaming was a thing, so video production there was quite different. We were making 1-minute video game clips to go up on the site. Nobody would talk over them, and you just watch gameplay for 1 minute, and it was amazing. And you said, "Wow, I need to get this game." So that was kind of my introduction into it over time. The long story short, 15 years ish later, we now are doing podcasts and live streams. This week we did 6 hours a day of live streams just to talk about the greatest games of 2020, and people watch it, which is still amazing to me. People are engaged with that content. People, and we'll get into this later, I'm sure, but it isn't just mammoth industry. It is so big now, where people have made careers, which is amazing to me, but I'm thankful for it, playing video games for the benefit of other people watching them play video games. Just playing the game, and other people are just going to watch it, not play the game. They're just going to watch this person play. So the first thing I'd really like to say is, that being said, I want to give so much credit to the people who make the games. I play them and talk about them. So as a critic, quote unquote, people really work so hard and give so much to make these games. They pour their life into them. And then for me to be able to just talk about it critically or with acclaim, is a very privileged position to be in. Without them, I wouldn't be able to do it. I do not make games. I want to make that very clear. It is a very tough job. what makes this different than other industries? I don't know for sure because I don't cover other industries, but what makes the gaming community and industry, in my mind, different, so if I'm speaking out of turn, I'm sorry, is that it's very new. It's a very new industry. It hasn't been around for a long time. And so I've been able, even in the last 20 years, to watch it go basically from talking about the mechanics of a game. How does it feel when you jump in the game? When Mario goes left to right, how does it feel when he jumps? Wow, he looks great. To now talking about things that Paolo got into a little bit of, like, what is the representation of this trans character in the game? How is this character? How is this game representing these communities? How is this game using the technology to tell this story? What is the narrative in this game? There used to be, a running joke 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it's not even worth talking about the story in a game. Like, that's, but now there are entire communities that go and sit and talk about the story that in these games and how it affected them. So it's so much has changed, and the technology moves so quickly, and it really just is a black hole for everything changing in our world. Games are online now, so is the world. Games echo what is happening so quickly. It's very nimble in society. People bring that back into games. It is an industry that was dominated by the voices of straight white men, and that has changed a lot as these people who grew up playing games used to be the kind of uh, um, haven for people who were maybe socially awkward. You kind of go and you play games. All those people grew up and now are making games, and now those voices are coming out. The LGBTQ community getting out there and making games that represent them to share those experiences. It's amazing. So it's no longer just big bulky dude with a gun running around. Now you have so many little experiences. Everybody's playing it. I'm sure everybody here in some form has played some kind of game on your phone, online. So watching that, compared to things like the movie industry, which, incorporates technology in ways of special effects, or sometimes it's like 3D is going to be a thing. Video games really are bringing in all the changes in audio, all the changes in online interaction, all the changes in visual effects. They all get married into video games in a way that's sometimes scary because of the online stuff, which is, again, challenging, and we'll maybe get into that, but makes it so fast-paced. The community is so diverse now, and I think games have represented that very well. Hope that answers that question. I'm sorry, I love talking about this stuff. I can go on at length. So Paolo, please cut me off if give me a thumbs up if point is made. I can get a bit chatty.
Yeah, well, I was thinking too, also as you were talking about that, about how technology has sort of enabled a lot of those new voices in the same way. I mean, in the same way that film production, the cost for film, for making films has gone down dramatically over the past, 30 years or so. The cost for making for making at least simple games has gone down dramatically, which gives a lot of people a chance to get their story out there that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah, for sure. The tools have been democratized in a way that allow you don't need $1 million to get a smaller game out there, but it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, but that being said, too, the big companies are also making more efforts to try to bring in more diverse people and have better representation in their games as well. So yeah, so it's been pretty great, and I feel like games journalism has become much more sophisticated as the stories have become more sophisticated. I mean, there's a lot of issues being raised in various video games blogs and things like that you would never have seen 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I think there's much
for sure, and it's something that actually is a little tough, where we were, we put a staff together to cover the nuts and bolts of games, right? Like when we built our staff, originally it was like, all right, well, let's get people who really know how to beat this game or have all this experience in games, and not necessarily a staff that is comfortable sometimes, though, they're great, but of talking about the social issues that affect games. And we spend a lot of time trying to navigate that, in making sure that it's impossible to tease out life from what's happening in the real world and what we're going through when we're talking about games. And so just a kind of a quick example of that, and I think one that is maybe illustrates that point very quickly is there was a Spider-Man game that came out not that long ago. It was a big, it's a Marvel license, multi-million-dollar game. Sony puts it out. And a lot of the discussion was, I'm really uncomfortable with Spider-Man working for the police. Like, why is Spider-Man doing missions for the police? I really don't like this. And that not necessarily about the swinging in the game, not how does he actually have unlimited web juice. It is doing missions for the cops actually makes me feel very uncomfortable in today's climate. And it was really interesting because that would not have happened 15 years ago. 15 years ago, we would have been talking about, I don't love the jump, in this game, or, it's too long. Yeah. So things have changed quite a bit.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and I think, for the general public, the ethical concerns in games almost always gets boiled down to the question of violence, which at this point there have been at least hundreds, possibly thousands of scientific papers that have been published on looking at violence in video games. And the general consensus is that it doesn't really seem to increase violence. There may be slight aggressive increases, over a short period of time, but you're not seeing, really major changes in people's aggression level based on games. But that being said, like any medium, it certainly has the capacity to reinforce, worldviews that can potentially be violent. And so my next question would be, so media shape how we see the world. They can reinforce or break down our assumptions about many things. What are the capacities and limitations of a game as an interactive medium to shape a player's worldview? What responsibilities do game developers have to make games that support ethical values?
Big question. as a big question, and I think the violence in video games, definitely has been talked about a lot. I think there is still more research to go. I personally believe the way the understanding of the brain is still one of the biggest mysteries mankind has, right? So research about mirror neurons, how things fire off, about empathy, and how do you relate, do you learn behaviors, do you desensitize to this behavior if you're exposed to it enough? And I think they should progress and keep doing this research. I think you have to tread carefully to not use video games as the scapegoat, kind of as things, this is the reason why, and as has been done in comic books, this is the reason why, violent movies. And who knows? It might be there, but I think it's tough to have both of those things at the same time, to say video games have no effect on your brain. Also, we can use these things to teach you things. we could. These are great tools to teach you something. I think that's talking out of both sides of your mouth at that point, right? You're saying it has no impact, but also this is a great tool to learn how to be an engineer. So I think we have to be careful. I think a lot of that comes down to what's age appropriate. And that's where I think a lot of the education needs to come in. I think video games are still looked at as the domain of, younger kids, right? Any video game is fine for any kid, and that is absolutely not true. I could not state that more emphatically. That is the content in those games can be extremely mature and affecting for adults who have a life of experience to come to those games. Sure, there are definitely games that are just be the first one to kill as many other players as you can, but that's not all video games are. There are a range of games. There are ones that are great for little kids. There are ones that are terrible for little kids. And whenever a parent or a peer tells me, hey, my 8-year-old is playing this war game, Call of Duty, and it's like, that is not age appropriate for that kid. Here are 15 other games that are amazing for that kid, that would really help that kid go on. I feel very lucky to be exposed to that, because I know how challenging that can be. The industry has not done a great job of policing itself and making sure that the tools are in the right spot to help parents and people guide those who should not be exposed to those games. They try, but it's not that great. I would love to give you some examples of how non-violent video games can affect people, because I think a lot of the focus is on violence in video games, and that is just not all there is out there. And I'm trying to think of a way to do this without breaking down, because these are kind of emotional moments in games. So do and Rob, your song definitely put me in the right headspace for this. So if I will try to get through it. There's one game called Brothers. I don't know if anybody's heard of it out there. There are going to be some spoilers for games. I apologize, but there's this game called Brothers where you use the controller. I'll hold one up in case people haven't seen it. I'll try not to get out of focus, but there are two sides of the controller basically, and you play as these two brothers throughout the game on a kind of fantasy adventure. And it's interesting how they use the controls. They use one half of the stick controls the older brother, and one half of the stick controls the younger brother. The younger brother is kind of scared a lot of the time. The older brother has to do tasks for the little brother because he's a little timid. Like the little brother is scared of water, won't swim. But so the other brother you have to navigate the older brother to do these things all at the same time. You're always using it in concert together. So spoilers for that game. The older brother dies at some point, and you're relegated to just using the one half of the stick because the other brother is now dead. You actually use this half of the stick to help bury that brother. It's a very sad moment. And so then later on in the game, the younger brother reaches this body of water, and the younger brother can't swim. He's afraid of water. And as a player, you can't progress. You just can't move forward. You try to go into the water, he recoils back. Try to move forward, he goes back, and you're stuck essentially until you put your hand back on the left side of the controller and push forward together. Where the older brother used to be. It's a very emotional moment of realizing, people are still with you, even though they're not there. It's very effective in playing the game, and it's something I think only games can do. And with the input from you in this dialogue with the developers, and it's very effective.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah,
sorry, it's actually funny that you used, because I did a talk maybe 3 years ago at the society, and I used this exact example. I brought in a controller, held it up as I was standing in front of the podium, and explained how it worked. So it's
amazing.
It is an excellent example. Absolutely.
The other one I'll bring up quickly that really affected me is this lovely game called Florence. It's a game you can play on your phone. It's a small game, and it's about it is about a relationship. It's about this young woman meeting this young man and having this amazing first, encounter, the love that is there, your first 3 months in any relationship. It's amazing. Everything's wonderful. It's fantastic. And you're putting together throughout the game, you're putting together these like puzzles of pieces that are just like, this is our life together. We're going to be together forever. And the game is like, put these puzzle pieces together. It's beautiful. Look at this picture. It's so awesome. Everything's going to be great forever. As the game goes on, the relationship starts to have tough times, and you wind up in the situation where things start to really spin out of control. The relationship starts to fall apart, and you wind up in this situation where you're trying to put one of those pieces together, but they keep drifting apart. So as you're putting the pieces together, she can't get the pieces of this relationship to stay together. It just will not work anymore. So you actually can't solve the puzzle. As you put one piece in, another piece drifts away. And it's a picture of them together. And as the player, you kind of come to this realization, it's just not going to work anymore. This relationship is no longer viable. And again, it's a great example how the game mechanics can incorporate into the narrative to really be effective, to illustrate to the player in a way that movies or books just can't do, because you're physically just trying to you're frantically, as fast as you can. The faster you go, the more they fly apart. And it's an amazing example. And I think games can be very effective in that sense, and really touched me emotionally, because it's probably something most people have been through, with that realization that this just is not going to work, So yeah, I know they're beautiful. There's so many. I could go on forever about moments. We've had a lot of moments this year in games, a lot of things that have really helped people deal with the pandemic this year, being isolated. A lot of games have touched a nerve with people. A lot of games that have dealt with death this year that have been very effective. But of course, yes, there's that whole other area of. And then there are games where people are just going online and trying to rack up the most kills, but there's a broad spectrum there.
Yeah, I remember Spiritfarer was certainly one of your favorite games of the year, or is it
It
the
is.
favorite game?
It is my favorite game of this year. Yeah. Which is
Yes.
I don't know if I can even talk about that one without without breaking down a bit.
Yeah, so Spiritfarer in the game, you're kind of the new Karen. You're transporting people from the world, the spirits from the world of the living to the world of the dead, and you kind of get to know them along the way. I haven't actually had a chance to play it yet, but I sort of know the very broad ideas of the game. So yeah,
Yeah,
so there are a lot of games that are dealing with more mature topics. So yeah, I wanted to pivot a little bit and kind of talk about sort of issues that are going on in games with regards to sort of the business practices. So, game companies are increasingly coming under fire these days for practices like things like microtransactions and loot boxes. So a loot box basically is like a slot machine, more or less. So you're paying some amount of real money to get a chance to get some piece of gear or digital content. And so then this has started to raise real concerns, and there are now a number of countries where legislators are considering whether this is something that should be regulated in some sort of a way. And um, so do you see these monetization practices having any place in an ethical business model? And do you think government has a role to play in legislating these kind of practices?
Oh boy, this is a big one. There's a lot of stuff. I think you touched on it in the beginning. There's a lot of stuff going on right now in the industry um, that really you could put under the microscope for ethical practices. I think you mentioned labor, representation. This is another one. This is a big one. So this kind of all spawns out of what Paolo said. You pay real world money to have this mystery item come out of a box, right? You don't know necessarily what it is, but you give the developer, let's say $5. Developer rolls the dice in the back end, doesn't show you what it is, and then the box opens, and all of a sudden you got a beautiful hat that looks like a cat, and you're like, that's not really what I wanted. Let me give you another $5. I'll pull the slot machine again. It is the definition. It is the definition of periodic and reinforcement. It is absolutely the Skinner box. It is without a doubt, I think, manipulative. And my biggest issue with it is the house has all your data. This is not necessarily you walked up to a slot machine. It is you have been playing this game. They know exactly how long you have played this game. They know the things that will keep you playing this game. They know exactly how much money you spend a month. They know all of this. The table is so stacked in their favor. The scales are so stacked in their favor. You have not a chance against it. They hire psychologists. They hire people that know game theory to keep you in this loop of providing money. So what happens? So people start looking at this and say, this is gambling. This is gambling. We regulate gambling. We need to regulate this. The industry says this is not gambling. These are prizes. These are prizes. You put the money in, you get a prize. It's not gambling. So that's where the kind of dividing line has fallen of and the big arguments kind of come out of, is this gambling or is this a prize structure? I do think they have a responsibility. And I feel like the responsibility and listen, if you are a billionaire and want to spend your money to dump into this game and get your cat hats and whatever you want to do, I think that is fine. I think the responsibility lies, like I feel like in a lot of places, of protecting the people that are most vulnerable to this kind of manipulation. I think it is, you need to have scaffolding in place to help people who are going to be taken advantage of in this situation. And it's not just children who might not know any better. There are people with real addictions. There are people who are going to get out of control on this, and you cannot take advantage of them. That is, I believe, a grossly unethical way to try to manipulate your bottom line. So do they need legislation? I do think if there is not a move within self-regulation, and there has been some movement here, but I don't think it's enough. And other countries agree that has not been enough, and legislation has been passed to kind of outlaw these. But they have removed a lot, and this is where I think the video game industry is kind of amazing. The video game industry, for the most part, caters to a very vocal audience. They are well tuned with technology. They're on every social media platform out there. They know how to use the tools. There was a game that came out called Star Wars Battlefront 2, I believe, the second, that broke this thing wide open. You can imagine a company, it's this company, Electronic Arts, EA, licenses the Star Wars product. They have this, it's a multi-million-dollar game. They make it, it goes out. The audience goes bananas with, because it's full of loot boxes, and they crossed this line, this, you know, this line in the sand, I guess, which was the loot boxes not only had cosmetic items, it had items that would help you play the game and win, and what they call pay to win. So people all of a sudden said, well, you have a better chance of winning if you spend more money in the game, and that's not fair. And they came under such heavy fire and critique that they wound up pulling that stuff from the game. And a lot of companies now are trying to avoid doing that. They do other things which I think are less effective. They actually will show you the items you have a chance of winning now inside the box. They'll sometimes show you the percentage chance you have. If you pay $5, you'll have a 10% chance to get this item, 5% chance to get this item, and a 9, you know, whatever the rest of the percentage. Sorry, I didn't keep track of the math to get this kind of garbage in the game. I think it needs to be better done. It's a very dangerous and slippery slope. But it is also how a lot of these companies do make money in the game, and disincentivizing that, I think, is going to be extremely hard. And regulating that. I think a lot of people see this in the mobile space as well. It's kind of where it came up. And they actually call them gotcha games, or a lot of times the mechanic, a gotcha game from Japanese gachapon, which are basically Japanese capsule machines. I don't know if you guys, everybody remembers those machines when you used to go to the supermarket, you put a quarter in, turn the knob, a little capsule falls out. It's got a little candy in it or a car in it. In Japan, they have those same things. You put your yen in, turn the knob, and a little toy would show out, but it's random. Gachapon is the name of those machines in Japan. The shorthand for that is gotcha, and it could not be more appropriate for that mechanic. I think it is something that needs to be looked at more deeply. I think there are severe problems with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's all sorts of other, that's not quite a loot box system, but it's sort of a similar type of thing. When you look at like Fortnite, for example, where they have a store where you can buy a hot dog costume or something like that for your character, but a lot of the stuff will be things that will only be available for a certain period of time, and so you think to yourself, oh well, if I want the hot dog costume, I got to get it now, and so instead of just making all the content available forever, they very purposely give you a very short window in which to act in order to try to get you to spend money as quickly as possible.
Yeah, it's a huge problem in the free to play market, which hey, everybody knows here, ain't nothing for free, right? So if it's free, then you're the product. So then if you it's a thing I have to deal with my kids, right? They hear about these games, and I would much rather I would love to pay the $15 and don't ask my children to buy gems or whatever else, whatever currency you need. Just let me pay the money up front and take that stuff out of the game. But of course they will not. So what do you do in that sense? What I try to do with my kids is sit them down and say, this is a bad game. Let me show you a good game. I know your friends are playing this, but like, maybe there's a better game I can show you that I think I think will suit you better. Because it's hard. They gate the games in ways that make you have to keep feeding in money for that, and they know it. Everybody knows it. It's that periodic reinforcement. Is that that periodic reinforcement is a tough thing, and it is, sometimes you're gonna get something great if you just keep going. Just give me the pellet, and it's, of course they know it. It's not coincidence.
Yeah. Well, it's like, for example, like my favorite game series of all time is the Civilization series, and at least on PC anyway. And it's a very addictive game. There's the famous one more turn syndrome, where you're just like, I'm just going to do this one more thing in the game, and then I'll shut it off and go to bed. And then 4 hours later, you're still playing and you haven't stopped. but in the, they're not really exploiting me by making it that addictive, right? Because I've paid my $60. They don't really care at that point whether I play 1 hour or 500 hours of the game. They've already made their money. But there are a lot of these games out there that are deliberately designed to keep you hooked for as long as possible, because that's how they can extract the most amount of money from you.
Yeah, it is absolutely a design decision. It is not, oh, our game just accidentally became so addicting. Wow, good for us. It is definitely designed and tuned to the point where they got in trouble, where people called, eventually called them out and said, you are designing your game to only be to cater to people who have spent more money than I have for this game. You're if you put more money in, you'll do better. You'll win in these matches, especially in multiplayer games, and that has become a huge problem. And especially for kids who parents may not know better. You buy the game, your credit card is on the system, and all of a sudden the game pops up with a thing that's like, did you know you can get more powerful if you just spend $5? Buy more gems. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'll put this button. And then, $150 later, when the credit card bill comes in, and I hear this story a lot from parents, is like, like, what the heck happened? I don't know. It told me to buy gems. What I clicked the button like I click every other button in this game. And the way they obscure those things in games of like donuts, you just need more donuts. And it's like, okay, I clicked the button that said get more donuts. And it's like, who knew that it was $1 a donut on the back end? The kid doesn't know. It's they make it with, and to get around some of the, I mean, I could talk about this all day. They get around some of the currency, the gambling issues. They actually invent multiple currencies. So okay, this currency is a currency you earn diamonds in the game. You only earn diamonds in the game. And then you can buy certain things with diamonds. The rubies, though, you have to pay $5 a ruby to get, but you transfer rubies into diamonds, and then you use diamonds to buy the actual thing. So you're not actually A to C, you're A to B to C, and that gets us around direct money to buy the item, because you're converting your dollars into this non-viable currency, and then you buy the thing. It's not gambling, it's a prize. And that is manipulative in a way that I think is kind of sleazy. And not all games do it, but there are, you gotta watch out.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So another area, sort of switching to another topic of, corporate exploitation, I guess. One of the sort of new areas of games that have developed, and as bandwidth has expanded, and you've had a lot more people streaming their gameplay experiences online. And so sometimes it's pre-recorded and they're just uploading footage of them just playing the game for half an hour to an hour or whatever, and just riffing as they go along, talking about what they see. Or they're playing multiplayer games and streaming it on a service like Twitch live, and people are commenting as they're playing and stuff like that. And so one of the issues that you've seen coming up recently is this issue of copyright. And so recently there was a huge incident on Twitch where all these copyright holders sort of almost at the same time just started dinging all of these streamers. So to some degree, the license holders were sort of anticipating, I mean, unrealistically, I would say at this point, anticipating that they were licensing out their music or their sound effects or other things like that to a game company that would then put it into the game, and then people would be playing it at home by themselves, right? And not anticipating that they were going to be streaming it to thousands of people. Although, well, I'll let you talk a little bit about that. So this has become a huge issue now. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
It is a uniquely video game industry issue. I'll try and keep it as brief as I can, but it is again, it's the convergence of technology and this medium. So you would be appalled, right, if somebody said you could just upload a movie and just start streaming it if you did not hold the rights to it, right? That seems like the FBI is going to knock on your door. You cannot do that. I cannot on my channel all of a sudden on YouTube. I cannot just upload all of Gattaca and then suddenly say, I don't know, watch Gattaca here. This is the place to watch it. That seems ridiculous. Games work a lot differently. A lot of games survive on them being up in the community to having people play them. A lot of publishers and developers will intentionally give them to people early or whatnot to play them on their channel. It is a means of a press for them. It is a means of getting exposure. A lot of games are multiplayer, and you can imagine what happens if you launch your multiplayer game and nobody's in it. You have then wasted millions of dollars. And so things like everybody's heard of Fortnite, I assume it's a huge game that is a multiplayer game and survives on people playing Fortnite. So what I imagine happens is people watch somebody play Fortnite. They're very good at it. They see them having a lot of fun. Now they want to play Fortnite as well. And that is what the developers hope happens. Copyright, where this runs into, so it's an interactive medium, right? You are a participant in this game. You are adding, it's an additive thing when you are streaming. The game, imagine a picture of a chessboard, right? It's a beautiful piece of art, but it doesn't activate until people start playing chess, right? The actual interesting thing about chess is the game of it, right? So until somebody is playing, it's like art in a closet. Sorry, this is like some of my BFA talking. It is art in a closet. It doesn't exist until people are interacting with the art. And games are a very similar way. Like it is a dialogue between the developers and players, and that to me is the interesting thing. So when people watch people play a game, they're watching somebody interact and have a dialogue with the game. I think, this is my opinion, I think the publishers are more than happy to have people out there showing off their game and playing it. Where things get really sticky are, say, the person who licensed a song to that game that is now playing in the background of that game. Like, Paolo, you wrote a song for that game, and now everybody who plays that game is broadcasting that song, enjoying that song. And the way the technology works is you, Paolo, can upload your song to a service like YouTube or Twitch. It takes a fingerprint ID of what that song looks like on a waveform. So as soon as YouTube or Twitch, the other streaming service, recognizes that waveform in somebody's stream, a computer is looking for the fingerprint ID of that song, it'll pull it down immediately, whether it's in a game or you're just streaming that song. So Paolo, you might own the rights to that song. You licensed it to be used in this game, but you did not say it was okay for me to go stream this game and then broadcast that song. And I think that's where it gets very tricky in a lot of those cases. My kind of non-lawyer answer to that is people need to be compensated fairly. You, as the rights holder to that song, need to be compensated in a way from the publisher or developer end for other people that are going to do this. If they're going to encourage people to stream their game, then you need to be compensated in a way that represents that kind of distribution of your work. And I think it's incumbent on them to handle that mess, not incumbent on the people who are streaming games to solve that problem. And I think the publishers or platforms really shutting down people playing the game, I think is not going to work. It is that closed fist, everything slips through the cracks kind of thing. I think it is in their financial interest for the developers and the publishers to solve this problem because they do want people to showcase their games. One of the weird solutions that came about on this was there's a game recently, you may have seen it in the news, it's called Cyberpunk 2077. They had an option in the game that it was called streamer mode, where you toggle it and it actually mutes the music from the game so that it would not get flagged in a system while you're streaming it. That's not a great solution to me. I think it is compensate people for their work in the way that it's going to be used. Don't blame the people who are then doing your bidding sometimes of streaming this game and then say, shame on you. Well, you should have known better. No, you're the people making millions of dollars. The platforms are making millions of dollars when people stretch. At the bottom of this thing is the person streaming making the least money sometimes on this thing, right? And they're the ones getting the blame for it, where the money's all going up to the top. It's a complicated issue. Rights management is it's a gray area when it comes to editorial stuff. I do think streamers are additive in that sense, and I do not think for most games that it is the game itself and the streaming of it. I think it's a lot of this stuff in between. Like I said, I think assets and songs and stuff like that where it gets caught up. Sorry, it's kind of a complicated thing with a lot of ins and outs.
Well, I remember, when you were talking about this on the podcast a couple months ago, There was even some examples you were saying that, you know, some of these game companies had sort of bought these packages of sound effects,
Yeah.
and that they were even getting dinged for the sound effects in their game. So
Yeah.
this copyright holder said, "Oh, this gunshot sound is actually ours,
Right.
so take this video down."
Yeah. Like I said, a lot of these things are fingerprinted in a system. It's just a machine algorithm that combs through the video. It's not a human there, and the default on the end is in in favor of the platform. You know.
I get
Yeah.
Jessie sends me some.
It's in favor of the platform holder, not the person streaming. So they'll just squash that immediately, and they don't give them a chance sometimes. And there are people who, you know, make their livelihood from this. There are people now who their whole career is streaming games. I'm in that orbit, so my sympathies there. And they just, you know, it's like they get their platform shut down because of a default to you're in the wrong. We're going to side with the publisher on this one.
I didn't realize it.
I mean, I heard stories of people like deleting their entire library of, you know, backlog of videos just, you know, to avoid this problem. Yeah. And again, as you said, most of these people are not making a lot of money off of doing this. So for it to fall on them is really just kind of awful.
It's awful.
All right. So so I guess, you know, aside from the stuff that we've talked about, or, you know, maybe delving a little deeper into one, you know, a couple of things we talked about, what would you say is one possible ethical issue related to games on the horizon? You know, something that maybe isn't an issue yet, but you can see it coming. You know, that as a games journalist, you know, as a parent, you know, really kind of keeps you up at night.
Oh man. What as a parent, what doesn't keep you up at night? What the things that worry me about games, it is really the relationship between now and is coming up, the social relationships between people that make games, people that stream games for a living, and the audience involved there. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of articles written about parasocial relationships, very one-sided relationships where audience members become infatuated and feel like they have a right to dictate how these people make their games, or what you should do when you're streaming a game, and you don't know these people at all. You know, you're just streaming out there. So there have been a lot of cases in the past, and I know you said going forward, but if we take the past as precedent, where it has gotten extremely nasty. It has gotten very, very dangerous out there, not only for developers, but for people who stream games, from people who get worked up. There was you know, sometimes you have a game series that has a fan base that is just rabid. And if the game makes a decision, the developers make a decision to try and be more inclusive, they want to change that main character to a female or a person of color, or try and be more representative of the world we live in, some of that rabid fan base can really go after these developers, especially women and female developers, or minority developers, or people that are not just straight white men. They will publish their home address. They will get out there and try to get them fired. They will dig through their social media to try and dig up anything they can on them. It is terrible out there, and toxic, and that worries me going forward in terms of those relationships. And that happens. There are great things about social media. There are terrible things about social media. It has raised up voices in a very positive way, where games can no longer get away with misrepresenting certain groups, right? It is no longer acceptable, if you're going to put a Native American in your game, to just give them a headdress and have them speak some mishmash of 7 different tribes' dialects, right? And you need to now have, and rightfully so, somebody on staff who has done the research to be like, this is the Native American tribe you're trying to represent. This is what they speak. You cannot just have, Native American in your game. That being said, the other side of that vocal spectrum is people being very aggressive towards developers and chasing people out of the industry, chasing minority groups out of the industry because, games belong to us. And I think that's very tough. along in that triangle of relationships, developer, people who stream games for a living, and the audience for both of them, the people that, this is where I get worried as a parent, the relationships between people who want to watch, especially because this happens with younger, a lot of younger people. You watch people play these games. You're involved in this community. What is that community? You're now involved in this. Your kids are now getting sucked into this community. All they want to do all day is watch somebody else play games. They're not even playing it. The worry isn't even that they're playing games on the couch all day. Now the worry is that they're sitting in front of a computer watching somebody else play games all day in a chat room with a bunch of other people who are, hope maybe similar minded or not. But this quote unquote influencer is what they call them, because it's a marketing term for people like this, because they are influencing people to buy products and games. What is this person saying in the 7 hours they're playing a game? I've done this for a long, long time. There's only so much to talk about in the game. At some point, you're just talking about the politics of the thing, or what this means to you. And like there are thousands of these people. So monitoring where your kid is, yeah, they might be watching somebody do a play Mario, but in the margins, they're also hearing, I don't know, God knows what dogma, right? Like, you don't know what's happening in there. And then it is feeding into that community because they're in a chat room also getting reinforced. And that stuff is frightening. It is also terrifying. You are mixed with, who in this audience would have, there are 1,000 doors in front of you and you have to open one and now spend the next hour with a group of people that you don't know on the other side, right? That's what online games are, right? You get matchmaked into a game of 10 other people. You open that door, you walk through, suddenly there's a white supremacist in there with you. Suddenly, there's all these different people with you on voice chat talking to you as you're trying to accomplish the goal. And there's somebody in there who's going to tease you, and that is really frightening to me. And my son Max is 8, and I still won't let him go online and participate in that way, because I've seen how toxic it can get in there. I've seen, I'm in my mid 40s. Like, I've been doing this for a long time. I like to think I have a thick skin. Stuff still penetrates with me. Like, I still get really upset when I read feedback about myself. Imagine like a developing kid who's in there being told what they need to be. And this happens in these relationships for streamers who are making their money off of an audience watching them. I've seen this happen for people who play games. They live stream a game and they are trying to be popular, and this happens across social media, right? They're trying to get the most likes. They're trying to do this stuff. And it's very easy to let the audience define who you are, and you lose sight of your actual true values. I can't actually make a stand. I can't actually say Black Lives Matters on the stream because I'm going to lose audience members, right? Or it's going to get people are going to hate me for it. Do you feel that way? I do feel like, then say it. I can't. I don't want to. And that stuff scares me. Those divisions, that polarization in those worlds, the way people are interacting socially with other people in these spaces, and the way the technology is outpacing what we can do to, again, protect the most vulnerable, is scary to me. I think we just went through, not to just directly put this into politics, a very polarizing 4 years, and we're maybe hopefully coming out the other side of it, but it's not going away. 2020 didn't just close a door on this stuff. And we have seen this happen in the games industry for years. It did not surprise me when this stuff happened in the real world, manifested in the real world, because I have seen groups of people say, it can be shorthanded to groups of, white men say, they're taking this away from us. They're taking our games away from us. And they're including all these other people in our games. This used to be about what happened to my Call of Duty, and it's like, when we saw all these grievances from people thinking that minorities are taking things away from them, this has been happening for a while, and that worries me. So I don't know. I think maybe the shorthand is humans. Humans worry me.
Well, I mean, I was thinking a little bit. I mean, arguably one of the best-selling games in the world has a creator who created it, who has some views that are absolutely abhorrent, and posts them on social media. And you wonder how many kids are following him on social media and seeing the really objectionable QAnon supporting stuff that he's posting.
Yeah, it's but that being said, there's also, I don't want to focus too much on the negative, because I think there is a lot of amazing stuff that happens. One of the this is a very dark game, not for children, but one of the biggest developers and one of the best-selling games, The Last of Us 2, which focuses, it is a story about revenge. It is extremely dark, but there is amazing representation in that game. The main character is a lesbian, her girlfriend is queer, and there is a transgender child in that game as well, and they're all main characters, and it doesn't focus, the game isn't about that, they just happen to be that. So it is again, not a game for children, but the big studios willing to put those characters in the spotlight and say, we're going to stand by this. It's $1 million product. It has to sell, and say, this is where we are. I think that's amazing. I think having that representation in a mainstream game like that is amazing, regardless of what I think about the story in that game, which is absolutely depressing. But like those characters go on to make terrible choices. But seeing more of that representation, having that be mainstream, saying that this character can do these things, having the princess save Mario is important. When I play games with my daughter, she wants to play the female character. She wants that representation in the games. It's important to her. And we're getting more of that. There's so much more to go, but I think it is a net positive that this is happening, because there's that pushback, right? That's what I'm talking about. There's that pushback from the people who are like, they're taking it away from us. And they're like, it's not being taken away. There are more games than ever out there. There are more people doing whatever. It's expanding. It's not shrinking. It's, this is widening the net. So I always say, if you've listened to the podcast, it's the best time. It's never been a better time to play video games, because all those old games, they still exist. They're still out there. Everything that happened before is still there. So yeah, I think I am concerned about that. I am concerned for other parents out there who don't know what to get their kids, their grandkids. It's very easy to just say, here's this console, here's this headset, get online. I don't know, everybody's doing it, your friends are doing it, go at it. And not realize when they come back and you're like, where did you hear that? And it's like, well, I was playing this game. That's, nobody wants to lose their kid to a community. Nobody wants to lose their kid. Nobody wants their kid to wander into the wrong room, suddenly come back and start talking about, lizard men and, QAnon theories and say, well, this person I idolize online told me that, Biden is a lizard man. So, what, it's those things are scary.
Yeah. So I think we have time, maybe a couple questions if people want to jump in. I don't know, Rob, if you're...
Sure, yeah. Jim Norman, we have Jim, your hand is raised. Go ahead and see if you can unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay, all right, good. Thank you, Rob. By the way, that was just a beautiful performance of that song. I loved every part of it, the song itself and the way you did it. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I realized that perhaps there's been a lot of focus on the so-called violence of video games and how it impacts our culture, and whether or not it actually makes changes in the brains of people who play them as youngsters and as adolescents and as young adults. And there, just a few days ago on January 6th, we saw this incredible video of the invasion of the Capitol building. And it occurred to me that what I was looking at was avatars come to life, characters who were painting themselves to become their own avatars, and behavior and superhuman feats that I wouldn't imagine possible in ordinary life, but are commonplace on video screens, people scaling vertical walls. I mean, this was really impressive. from that perspective. And I really, really think that whatever else might be involved that creates a gang of people who would do something like this, I think that video games have to be looked at much, much more carefully than they have been. I think that we saw video games being reenacted. And now that I hear Paolo and Vinny talking about the kinds of attitudes that are if not prevalent, certainly exhibited in this realm of video games, I think that we need to take a good close look at the connection between video games and what happened on January 6th.
I agree. I think that is my you know, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I haven't studied this very well, but I do believe, you know, you can exacerbate existing tendencies, right? I do think those kinds of things. I don't know for sure if I would put all my money on, does it develop those tendencies? But I certainly think it could exacerbate those. And I think you are right, Jim, in that when you look at those pictures, you see some people that probably were like, I want to emulate what I've seen in these games, right? I'm the weekend warrior. I've stocked up on all my camo gear and I've got all this stuff, and war and fighting is just a game, and let's go do it until, you know, they don't, you know, respawn at the end after they lose all their health. And I think that is something absolutely to be looked at and see this and see if those tendencies are you know, encouraged from that kind of behavior. I think you know, can you get in a situation where, well, I could do it in this game, I could do it here, right? And that does need to be looked at.
Yeah. So I just wanted to add a little bit of a point there. So when you were talking before about how, you know, it sort of seems silly on the one hand to say that, you know, oh, you know, this has the ability to educate people and, you know, and change minds and things, but also we want to say that, you know, it has no effect whatsoever, you know, when it's the bad stuff. You know, the similar conversation was happening around music, you know, certainly in the 90s with regards to rap music and, you know, and heavy metal. And I remember the comedian Chris Rock at one point was making a joke about it, and he was saying, well, you know, what was in Hitler's CD case, you know, to sort of try to show that, you know, it's not a question of violence in music. And I thought about it and I said, well, what was in Hitler's CD case was Wagner, which was pretty anti-Semitic. So, you know, it didn't necessarily cause him to do that, but certainly, you know, it reinforces a worldview. And I think that is just as true for any other medium as well.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so let's, the next question is coming from Teresa Forsman. Teresa, go ahead.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you, Vinny, for a very interesting talk. I have never played a video game, but a few days ago, I read an article by a game designer. His name was Reed Berkovitz. I don't know if that means anything, but he wrote an article about game design, specifically alternate reality games. And I took down a quote that he wrote in his second paragraph. He said, "When I saw QAnon, I knew exactly what was going on and what it was doing. I had seen it before. I had almost built it before. It was gaming's evil twin, a game that plays people." And I thought, I'm going to see what this gaming expert thinks about that.
Yeah. So it was funny. I was talking to Jessie about this. I think they were on NPR talking about that very thing. Yeah. So absolutely, the tactics that QAnon uses, the false reality, the building of an illusionary world, are absolutely things that game developers want to do, right? They want to engross you in this world. You know, they obviously, well, I hope so, don't want to incite violence. But, you know, people use tactics that have been used in art and media to move people to, you know, all sorts of ends. I think in all art, right? It's tough. I wouldn't pin it on like it's the fault of video games, and I'm not sure that's where you're going. But you know, I think some people would say, this is something that's in games. It's being used by groups like QAnon. Therefore, the games are bad. And I think it is something that is inherent to both, that stems from a single a shared root, right? The root of these things is the same, and that is, we want to create a world that is believable, that is a fiction. We want to be as engrossing as possible. One goes off this way, hopefully, to a virtual enjoyment or augmented reality, or a living world where you're a knight fighting a dragon. This one goes off into pushes people to storm a Capitol building, right? And I think the similarities are absolutely there, but I think it's not. It's like a false cognate. It doesn't necessarily mean that it went from that to video games to QAnon. I think they come from a similar place, if that makes sense. They're kind of using the same source tactics.
Well, thank you. I mean, just to clarify, I don't know enough about video games to be critical. I that wasn't my intention, but
Right.
it was a curious article. So
yeah,
thank you.
it's a great point, because I think building a false narrative is what fiction does, right? And the more believable the narrative, I think that stems, a lot of those things stem from where I feel personally is just better education, hopefully trying to gate misinformation, but blurring the lines between fiction and reality. At least when you put the disc in the game, you're hopefully knowing that you're entering a fictional world, whereas in some other places where we've now knocked down all of our media structures, that line becomes a little blurrier.
We only have time for a couple more questions, I think. Christina Grant has a question. Go ahead, Christina.
Hi, Vinny. I'm
Hey.
glad. I love this talk. I'm an avid gamer, so I could talk about a million different topics with you. I grew up playing games, Nintendo, PC games, Civilization, Carmen Sandiego, things. I mean, I credit Carmen Sandiego with me being really, really good at geometry. And then, worked our way up to getting a PlayStation and playing those kind of games. And I'm very particular about the types of games I like to play. I don't like the super bloody fighting. To me is like, oh, this is something I have to do to just get along in the game and learn other things. But once I had my daughter, I kind of made it my policy to not really play the games in front of her, because even games that aren't necessarily violent, like Life is Strange or Brothers, they still have elements that are disturbing or upsetting or scary. And so I used to play, when she was asleep or when she was at school and I was home or whatever. Now with the pandemic, we can't escape each other, and so she's just around when I play them. And so we're kind of navigating that world of how do I play this and have her be able to see it, and I have to discuss things with her about, yeah, they're bad, but now look, I'm turning them good, but and it's a lot of discussion. So I want to know what you do with your children, especially since this is your industry. And you have to play games to review them. How do you approach it with your kids?
Yeah, thanks, Christina. Great question. I do not play them in front of them. I also, it is after hours. The kids have reign of the consoles or the TV on the weekend, and they play the games that we think are appropriate for them. And then it is after they go to sleep is when, or if I can do it during work time, I'm in the basement. I also gate exactly what they can see because of the points you brought up. These things are not. I treat it as I would movies, right? Like, hey, would I watch this movie in front of the kids? And I would, in certain cases, I would not. I feel very lucky, and parents who are versed in games and know what's going on can pause a game if they do encounter something with their children and say, do you have any questions about what is going on here, right? Do you want to talk about, do you understand what's happening here? Like you said, this was a character that has now turned bad, good or bad. Do you want to talk about this? And I feel like kind of anything else, you want to engage with your kids in that level. It's a question that it's kind of my default response. I'm sorry if it comes off as kind of a dodge, but engaging with kids in this stuff, I think, is the way to get through it a lot if there are questions, and that's, you know, hey, why do you like this Twitch streamer? Like, what about this? You know, talk to me about this. You know, why do you like this game so much? What about it? You know, can I see it? You know, what are we doing here? For younger kids, obviously, that don't have alone time, right? I feel like we're probably monitoring our kids all the time and watching what they're doing. It's a little easier, but once, you know, I don't know, I'm looking at my watch, how many more years do I have until it is solo time on the consoles, and you can't be there all the time, right? And I think just trying to participate in that world and engage in it is what I hope will be the way through in my own parenting, and saying, let's talk about why. Okay, I like this person. Our kids actually started. I'm going to sidetrack a little bit here, but hopefully I'll come right back to it. It is impossible to have our kids be virtual students on a computer. And I love my children, and I think they are very technically adept and smart. They know how to open a new tab and go somewhere else when they are in school. They know when they are bored, they know how to open a new tab and start watching whatever they want. And unless I have two kids, I can be in one room, I can be in the other room, but I cannot be in both rooms. And you know, we're there sooner than I would have liked, because they are in class with other kids. On break, they're instantly talking to the other kids about what they're doing and what, you know, different households and different parents have different regulations and what they can watch. Suddenly I come in, my kid's on YouTube. YouTube has played the video that they intended to see, has then gone on to play the next 5 videos, and suddenly they are watching something that is completely inappropriate. And you know, I think then saying, what we've tried to do is say, hey, I can't stop this from happening. Like, I can't be there the whole time to stop this. I can't slap people on the wrist and say, you're in school, you know, don't do this. But what we tried to do is say, bookmark it. Whatever you want to watch, bookmark it. We'll watch it on the weekend. We'll sit and we'll look at it together. And that way I can try and or my wife can try and sit there and make sure Jessie is understanding that I appreciate her, to sit there and watch these things together. And you know, I've tried all sorts of things. I don't feel like I'm a dumb when it comes to the internet. I've tried turning autoplay off. I put filters on to turn comments off, done all this stuff. I still walk in that room and you know, my son immediately shuts the thing or goes off. So you can't protect your children at all times from all things, right? But you can try and guide them and have conversations. And hopefully I've started to try to introduce my kids, or my son at least, who's a little older, into more mature games. And I've tried to, I don't know if anybody here has heard of Roblox. All his friends want to talk about is Roblox. And I sat with Max, and Max, if you're listening to this, he knows it. And we looked at Roblox and we said, boy, this is inane. Like this, don't you want to play something else? This is just not fun. Like what is appealing about this? And what's appealing is he gets to play with his friends, but it's one of those community things, and again, engaging and talking about, do you think this is fun? Would you rather play, you know, Super Mario, like, or would you rather play Mario Galaxy or something like that? Providing alternative paths, providing things, I think and being informed. I mean, that's really it, right? Like trying to keep yourself informed and your kids informed. Sorry, that's kind of a tangent, but hopefully that gets to some of what you meant.
Great. Thank you for the answer there. Ron and Lisa, go ahead. I'll ask you to unmute. There you go.
Hi, Rob. Thanks a lot. You know, thanks so much for this platform. I just want to say that I was not going to come on because it's a topic that, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, because it's a topic that I did not think I was interested in. Then I was in the kitchen and I overheard Vinny. Vinny, also thank you. I was overhearing you talk about the brothers game, and I'm a retired school social worker, and I did a lot of counseling with kids. And one of the things that I use to engage kids is literature, and of course, trying to enter their world. So, you know, we talk about their music and what they were into, and then try to engage them. So I did a lot of, actually, I love games, but I play board games. I don't know about, you know, this kind of gaming. But when you were talking about brothers, my first thought was, wow, what a great tool for addressing sibling rivalry, or the death or grief. If a sibling or somebody in your family dies or somebody you love die, you can deal with grief that way through this game. So those were my thoughts when I was hearing about this. And my question on the chat was, how could these games be used educationally? And Christina, you answered it in one way, and I'm sure it can be used in a lot of ways educationally. But I was thinking of it in terms of counseling with kids and how this could be used to address so many issues, because it's the world they're living in, and you can use it to address those issues. So just if you want to comment on that. And by the way, I think you're doing great parenting. So, just
Thank
to
you.
watch what your kids are watching and be able to discuss it with them is the way to go.
There's a website I would recommend if you really want to dive into the Games for Change. They actually have a festival, and they promote games that are kind of right in that wheelhouse. Well, these are games that are used in education. These are games that are used to affect change. They're not games that are multiplayer combat arenas. These are games that are mostly focused on moving people that you can use for the kind of purposes you talked about: education, exploring other views. Games for Change is a great place to go for that. There are games is such a broad term, right? So like, is anything you interact with a game? There are visual novels a game, but there are a lot of games for education. I mean, I've learned as an adult, there are games that spark my imagination in ways because it's a game about car repair, or how factories work, or products, or in the other side of things, about games about, there was a game about a war, This War of Mine, where you play as the survivors, or the people are trying, not the combatants, the people who are living through a war, and the civilians of a war. That kind of expand these things that a lot of people have come out and said, I'm from a country that has been through war, and this game really resonates with me, and kind of gives perspectives there. So yeah, I think games, there's so much good, and there's potentially so much dangerous, and it's, I look at it again as any other medium. You have good books, you have bad books, you have books that inspire people to greatness, you have books that inspire people to evil. And games can be inspirational on a lot of levels.
Great. Let's see. I'm going to see if we can get two more questions in here. First, we'll go to Diane Kozarski. Diane, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Vinny, this is very interesting. And my only awareness of gaming is being fond of The Witcher by way of cable television. And so I went back and looked at some of the promotional material for the video game from which this was derived. And I was just awestruck at the capability of creating worlds that you referenced before. But I wanted to, maybe it isn't a big enough pool of creators to judge from, but can you see a gender difference in the kind of games that women designers create versus the classic guy games that have been dominating for so long?
I think that I think if you're trying to represent a certain point of view, life experience is obviously going to play a big part of that, right? So if a game is about what it's like to be a female in a male-dominated world, clearly a woman who has lived through that is going to represent that much better than a man trying to say, look at my female protagonist and all the troubles she has to go through. I think it's tough for me to say that in terms of, it depends what they're going for, I guess, is my answer, right? Like I think women and people can share life experiences that, if you want to make a puzzle game, probably not. Right? But if you want to make a game that has a certain experience, then if you have lived it, it will resonate a lot more sincerely and soundly. People who play games in those communities have become so much more sophisticated, and they can sniff it out in a second now if you're faking it. And if it doesn't ring true, they can go and look up the credits for the game. They can easily see who did it. And so a lot of game companies have become a lot more aware of don't fake it, and this is why these developers and these companies need to hire more diverse staffs, right? Because if you don't have those people on your staff that you're trying to represent in a game, it's going to ring hollow. You're going to make mistakes. And so I guess the short answer to your question is it all depends, I think, on what that game is trying to represent. And if that is, if that makes sense, sorry.
I think we have one last question from David Bland. David, if you want to unmute.
Thanks. Actually, Diane asked my question, so I'm going to ask a tangential question. Am I correct? I'm not part of the gaming world. But it's my impression that still most gamers are male, not female. And is that correct? And any evidence? I don't even know if anyone would really know.
So they do a lot of demographic studies because clearly they're trying to sell a product, right? They want to target products towards certain demographics, so age groups and this and that. I want to say a lot of things, but I'm going to get them wrong. But I want to say that they tipped over at some point into it being fairly equal, if not more people who identify as female playing games at a certain point. Now, certain games are going to skew certain ways, so it just kind of speaks to the breadth and depth of the types of games out there. And I'm sorry if I'm getting some of these numbers wrong, but I really want to say games like Animal Crossing, which is this game that came out on the Nintendo Switch, had a large majority of players that identified as female playing it. So it might be game by game, and I want to say overall the aggregate has gotten a lot closer to a fairer distribution among people who identify as male or female. And here's a really interesting point, David, that that I appreciate as things move forward. These developers, as things get more diverse and people grow up playing games and they want to make games and they come from all different backgrounds, they're also getting older. And so you get a lot of games now that deal with parenting. A lot of games now that deal with getting older. You know, there are developers now that are in their 60s and 70s that are saying, I want to make these games that represent my life, that are about getting older and what the world is like. And it's kind of amazing to have this young industry, which wasn't around 20 years ago, let's say, for the sake of the argument, let's say it wasn't huge 35 years ago, now move with you. This living thing that is like, well, this is great because as I'm playing games, these games are coming out about being a father. Now these games are coming out about my back hurts. Now these games are coming out about, like, you know, all these things that I'm living with, that it used to just be, again, these fantastical things. But they're representing more and more people. And I think, like Paolo said, this game Spiritfarer that came out this year was about death and helping people move on. And it was, you know, about living life and helping others in your life, and then having to help yourself when it comes time for you to meet your fate or move on. And, you know, these games are starting to represent a larger spectrum of the population and meet their needs.
Great. I think that's all the questions. Thank you very much. And back to you, Paolo.
Thank you so much, Vinny. It was great talk. You know, you were incredibly knowledgeable, but also, you know, just interesting to listen to. And, you know, you have a real humanistic, you know, personality that I appreciate.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.